Jinx in Town from YouTube had this question. How does one feel grip? How does one quantify and measure how much grip we have on a motorcycle? And funny enough, Immortan Joe on our Discord server had a similar question because yeah, we're that big of a deal. Immortan Joe chills with us. It's no big thing. But anyway, back to the question at hand. And this is a tough one because feel or feeling grip is very subjective. And unlike many other techniques, I can't give you feel. Just like I can't give you a sense of humor or taste for that matter. But I do have some strategies for you that can put you into a position to develop feel on your own. Hi, my name is Dave, and I've been a professional motorcycle coach for 25 years, beginning with teaching state, basic, and experienced rider courses for over a decade. I'm currently a champion certified coach with Champ School. I'm certified with USMCA, and I work with our local track organization to provide on-track coaching, among other things. So let's get into this. First, we have to ask, why is feel so important to us as riders? And how do we develop it? I mean, feel can mean a lot of different things, but it's the connection we have with the bike and the terrain, and even to a certain extent with ourselves. But at its core, the real value of feel lies in what it gives us. It gives us confidence. With feel comes the ability to trust our instincts, to make quicker decisions, especially when the pace comes up or when the grip goes down. If you talk to racers or even watch interviews with some of the best racers in the world, when they ask them about feel or a bike setup that they like, they'll tell you the reason why this is so important to them is because they can feel what the bike is doing and anticipate what the bike is going to do. And that's what we all want, right? We want to be able to react to what the motorcycle is doing in real time. If we can feel the bike or feel how much grip we have, we're better equipped to react more appropriately. So on the racetrack, and this is why the racetrack is such a great learning environment, we have a better idea of how much grip is available, and that available grip is going to be more consistent throughout the course of the day. And I mean, this is part of why we can go so much faster with relatively less risk on a track because, as we all know, we don't often know what our grip level is on the street. It could change from road to road based on how much shade this section is getting, or if we're heading up canyon and gaining elevation where the temperature is dropping, or whatever else. So another way to think about or parse this is to think of feel as collecting data in real time. All right, so that's cool and all, but how do we do this? We first need to start with two things: consistency and motor control. Let's talk about consistency first. If we're inconsistent about how we interact with the bike or how we approach corner entrance or even posture, it's going to make it really hard to collect usable data. At its worst, inconsistency is like trying to solve a puzzle with pieces from different sets. If your inputs like posture, corner entrance, or bike interaction keep changing, the data you collect won't fit together in any meaningful way. Consistency gives you a clear picture, and without it, we're just guessing. Now let's get a little bit more specific and talk about motor controls. Motor control is the ability of the nervous system to coordinate muscles and movements efficiently and accurately. It's how we move our hands and fingers and all that, right? If we're abrupt, there's no way that we're gonna have feel. If we snap, grab, jam, mash the brake lever, there's never going to be any feel. Think of it like grabbing a pencil and just snapping it, as opposed to if we try to slowly bend it. When we move slow, we can hear the wood crackle as it starts to bend, and then we can adjust how much pressure we're putting in, which results in much more control, right? Well, it's the same idea. But also, if we don't have consistent movements, consistent motor control, and how we interact with our controls, it's gonna be really hard to develop feel. So we start to think about how we initiate braking, how we roll off the throttle, or how our body movements take place. Do you lift and plop down into the seat, or do you slide across it? When it comes to braking and throttle, you've heard me talk a lot about the first and last 5%. The first and last 5% of a braking event is done slower so we can feel what's happening. It's just like bending that pencil. So yeah, putting ourselves into a position to have feel with our motor controls is extremely important. So let's talk about that for a second. What would happen if you stood up and you put all of your weight onto your hands and then you tried to type an email on your computer? or play the piano for that matter. Do you squeeze your phone really tightly when you try to send a text message? No, you'd have no feel. So when we brake, what are we doing and what should we be doing? Who was taught to squeeze the gas tank with your legs to keep the weight off your hands? And who's discovered that in the real world, that doesn't actually work all that well? So what actually works is when we brake, we adjust our hands so that the weight is going through the palms of our hand. Well, what does that do for our fingers, right? That allows our fingers to remain free and actuate the brakes, and same thing with the clutch. We want to make sure our handlebars or our clip-ons are adjusted correctly. And then we can adjust how we're sitting on the bike to ensure that as we brake, we're letting that weight transfer through the handlebars into our palms. We feel the front tire with our hands and our fingers. So when we corner, what do you suppose we should do? In faster bends, we do what? We rotate into the corner to reduce lean angle by moving our head to the inside. So we want to keep our core engaged and actively put weight down into our foot pegs. Remember, I talk about like flexing the calf. And we want to put pressure on our outside thigh. You know that thing you've heard about cornering, get your butt out of the seat, especially if you've ever done track day or been on the track? We still want at least half of our bum in the seat because we want some weight on our rear end. We feel the rear tire with our butt and our feet. So back to being consistent about how we move on the bike and how we interact with our controls, it becomes really important. If we are consistent with how we go to the brakes, how we release the brakes, how we tip in, how we pick up the throttle, how we roll off the throttle to the front brake, then we can start to develop more feel. So now if feel is basically data collection in real time and we're being consistent with how we interact with the bike, we'll start to pick up on where we have feel and where we don't. So now if I don't have feel at a certain point in a corner, then I can think about what am I doing with my hands or my fingers, my butt or my feet at the point where I don't have that feel. Is my core engaged? Are my feet in the right place? Am I holding on too tight with my hands? Am I not holding my weight up with my legs? Am I sitting on the bike correctly? And this takes us back to why it's so important to make sure our ergonomics on our motorcycle are correct for us. Are the controls set correctly for your biomechanics? If they aren't, maybe that's contributing to why we would have less feel turning left or right. Maybe the brake or maybe the clutch lever is at some weird angle. Now, I talk a lot about setting controls in this other video, so maybe give that a look. And then the final thing, are we being present in the moment? So questions I ask myself when I'm riding. Am I actively using my eyes and focusing on where I am, what I'm doing, and where I want the bike to go? Seriously, the more present we are in the moment, then the more capable we are of feeling the bike and feeling grip. Front end feel comes from our hands and our fingers. Rear end feel comes from our bottom and our feet. So, for example, when I'm coming into a corner, what am I most concerned with? The front tire, right? So I'm focusing on my front tire and my front tire grip. That's where almost all my attention is going. If I'm not focusing on, or my mind is wandering and I'm thinking about other things, then I don't have much bandwidth left over to think about my front tire, and I'm not going to have near as much feel. So I'll even talk to myself in my helmet as I'm going into a corner. I'll front, 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 front. And the same thing goes when I'm exiting. I'm focused on my rear tire. I'm putting my attention on my butt and my feet, and what is my rear tire doing? And same thing, I'll talk to myself. As I get the bike turned towards the exit and I start rolling on that throttle, I'm saying to myself, rear, 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 rear. Because how we interact with the controls is so important before I ride. Every time, especially at the start of a day or the first ride in the spring or whatever, I want to warm up my brain too. So before I start the bike, I practice a few times. I go to the brakes and release them. I go to the throttle and I close the throttle. I roll off the throttle to the front brake. I get my hands working and I get my brain working, and I remind myself, where am I and what am I doing? So now you're asking, okay, so What can we practice? Well, number one, riding in a low grip environment. I know I talk about this all the time, but riding something slow in a low grip environment gives you so much time to feel what's going on. Our initial controls, getting weight off of our hands at a slower speed, like slowly bending that pencil so we can learn what to pay attention to. Remember, we're focused on techniques that work when the pace comes up or when the grip goes down, right? Okay, so aside from mountain bikes or dirt bikes or whatever else, how about go-karts? Skittling around on that polished concrete floor. What a great place to learn feel, right? If you slide at all, you've lost time. There's a lot to learn from that, right? So even in my car, in my case, my pickup truck, I love driving, so I do the same thing. As I accelerate, I try to feel the rear tires with my butt and with my feet. As I brake or steer, I try to feel through my hands and my fingers. And this can be a pretty big deal where we can learn a lot about feel. Listen, feel is largely dependent upon grip, right? That's what our goal is to feel grip, to react and respond to the bike in real time, depending on how much grip we have. So is there a way where we can test how much grip we have if we're worried? And there sure is. If it's a cool morning or if the start of the day or even if conditions change in the middle of the day, I'll test my grip by locking my rear wheel. Not at speed, obviously. But what I'll do is I'll slow way down, and while straight up and down, I'll slowly build pressure on the rear brake. And if it locks immediately, what does that tell us? It means I don't have much grip. And now I can make adjustments to my riding to accommodate all that. Okay, so what are your thoughts here? What tricks have you used to develop feel? Let me know. I really want to thank Jinx in Town and Morton Joe for the great question. If there's a question that you'd like to see me take on, let me know. If you've liked this video or if you've picked up something new, please click on the things. It really helps this channel grow, and it helps YouTube know what kind of content you enjoy. I've always wanted to keep this content free, so please consider supporting this channel with a few bucks. It really does make a difference. Thank you so much for watching. Ride on and ride well.